Thank you so much, everyone. Good evening. Everyone on the line, thank you so much for joining. I know this is a little bit of an awkward time. I'm not sure how many people are parents here on the call, but I have little ones. And this is around bedtime.
And
So everyone is confused. Why is mom still working? And I have given strict instructions for that door to remain closed. But I cannot guarantee. So
that's
I'm putting
fine.
out a bit of a disclaimer there to say, please do not be surprised if little people come bursting through the door, because this room, out of all the rooms in the house, does not have a key on the door. So let's see how that opens, how that goes. I'm going to share my screen now, but before I do that, I would really like to say what an amazing initiative, what an honor it is for me to come talk to you here today. Um, Kim reached out to me about 2, 3 weeks or so ago. I had seen on LinkedIn, a post about UXIM. A colleague of mine presented to you guys a couple of weeks ago. His name is Chaneza Chan, amazing guy. And I know Chen held that space. It's really a platform of value, and it's really amazing to see the craft growing in Zim. My role at the bank actually allows me to look after various countries where Standard Bank has a presence, and we've been struggling with design in Standard Bank Zim. So this has rekindled my fire. I am going to go back and have conversations to say, hold on, you actually do have a community there. So let's see what we can do. So thank you everybody for inviting me, and I hope you find this session valuable today. As I had mentioned, I'm Sebabatso Mtimkulu, and I will be speaking to you about the user-centered design methodology. I will be very honest and say this is actually outside the realm of what I'm used to speaking about. There are certain areas of interest that always pull me in, and they've always been asked to speak about around psychological safety, around team effectiveness, etc. So this was, to be honest, quite a most pleasant and welcome, deviation or change from what I usually speak about, because I started relating back to the craft. Um, and it also forced me to go back to, perhaps my days as a designer that was starting out in the industry, what my frustrations were. And really, my hope for this session is that perhaps some of those things that people on the line today that are maybe budding in this field, the frustrations that you're facing from a process perspective, maybe certain things, certain emotions, certain frustrations that you're feeling, those can be normalized as a day-to-day part of design and what we do. And I really truly hope that you leave here feeling validated, but also with some form of a cheat sheet. I've actually now moved on ahead because there is a slide where I mentioned that exactly. So if I go a little bit into myself, so I bumped into experience design. I actually stumbled upon it by accident in the year 2006. And I'm very pleased to see that, most people are choosing design as an intentional career path. For me, the growth and, the sustainability of the field is the more we lessen people who stumble upon this field and, make this a known craft, make this a craft that people intentionally choose. That's how we're going to get to build the maturity in our capability. I stumbled upon it in 2006. It wasn't called user experience design in South Africa then. I was actually looking at my LinkedIn profile. At some point in time, I was a usability analyst, because usability testing and trying to make things usable was perhaps the most best associated descriptor of it. But as you had read, in the biochem, I've been very fortunate to really grow with the experience design field in South Africa and really understand the pain points. And the community is still so small, even here, that everyone knows everyone. And I think that growth over some time has really allowed me to bring in my experience and value. I hope in organizations that I've worked on. So from a qualifications perspective, I hold a Master of Technology degree from the University of South Africa with a specific focus on human-computer interaction. At the beginning of this, Kim just read out the number of industries and fields that I have been involved in my career. And I think that's also, what has allowed me to be a little bit more empathetic, because I understand what it's like to be a consultant. I understand what it's like to be a permanent person employed in a company that does not understand design. So this, I've packaged here and truly hoping would be valuable to you. So still a bit of an overview about myself. So at Standard Bank, I look after what we call group design operations. Standard Bank is operational in over 20 countries in Africa. Right now, design presence is still very only strong in South Africa, and we're looking at changing that. So the bank really has quite a number of initiatives that are exciting, that are leapfrogging us into quite a complex digital ecosystem. And experience design has really become, quite an important part of that journey. So trying to, advocate and educate all of our other regions. That's why I'm very excited about this, because I can go and open the conversations with our teams in Zim. But I've just given an overview here of essentially what, a design ops role would entail within Standard Bank. It's not just me and the team, I have other colleagues as well, but it's really, we are the custodians of experience design in Standard Bank. And as far as possible, we try to help teams work together. We try standardize how we get work done. We evangelize and educate the group around, the work or the impact that design has in the organization, so that more impact can be felt, and therefore more investment can be made in helping us grow the capability. I'm also the founder of a small design consultancy called Joy to Use. I picked up that there's quite an entrepreneurial spirit with most of the guys dialing into the call. I have a small team that's looking after this sort of things. So most of my focus is actually my work at the bank. So what Joy to Use does is we focus on design consulting, as well as what we call design talent pairing. And what that is essentially connecting great companies to great designers. There's so many nuances and areas of specialization with design, is that really hiring people into teams is not a one size fits all solution. So we have a little bit of a bespoke solution in helping, clients that are looking for designers find the best suited talent that will be able to be immersed into the business and grow accordingly. And then my most important job, I am a mom. As a bit of a disclaimer that I gave before, to say I don't guarantee what is going to happen in the door behind me. So I'm married. We've been married for almost 10 years. I was telling my husband next year we need to do something. And he's skeptical, because we're also going through quite a bit of a change. We're building a house actually, and that's very exciting. But as you can imagine, that's quite strenuous. So he's saying, we're not doing anything extra outside of finishing this project. So we've been married for almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years in 2023. And we have a 6-year-old little girl there. Her name is Zanogutla. She's feisty and smart. And we have a little boy, Tando. He's 2. He loves Teletubbies. I don't know if you can see here, he's holding Lala, the Teletubby. And there we are. I tried to squeeze in a selfie with all of us in there, which is usually quite a struggle to fit everyone in the picture. So if we're to go back to this evening, what we want to get out of this session. When I spoke to Kim initially, and she positioned the type of people that would be joining the call, it sounded to me that it is maybe guys that are starting in design. Perhaps there are certain things that would need to be outlined from, how do we go about making our process as simple as possible? What do I reference? Because I know that's something that I struggled with. I mean, it's something that even very experienced people in the craft still struggle with. So I'm hoping as part of this sessions, just outlining what those challenges are faced by experienced design entrants, but also what are the mindsets that we need to have in order to overcome really how we show up as designers. And then we'll go into talking about, applying a user-centered design way to solve problems. There's so many ways. Which one is it? Is there a better simplified way that we can all reference, but that still, speaks to the multiple approaches that we have out there? But most importantly, this is an interactive session, so please be ready to share. Put up your hand, comment, vent, agree, disagree, etc. I think that's where the power of community and the power of sharing our experiences and then our knowledge really comes into value. So what would make this evening a success for me? Number one is just some validation of some feelings and some emotions that you're going through. And number two is a cheat sheet. I've called it a cheat sheet. So helping you better navigate, reference, apply appropriate design tools and techniques to solve problems. So I think we can get started. And this is the first interactive, let's talk about this part of the presentation. I know not everyone has access to Jamboard, but out of interest, I just wanted to find out, in the design process that you follow right now, are there certain frustrations that you are currently facing? I started populating my list here. And I started thinking back, my role right now does not, encompass a lot of actual design deliverables. So we don't necessarily deliver product because the role is a lot more of, enabling the bank to invest more in design. So it's a lot more around education and advocacy and communicating value. But I had to think back to a time where I was actually a designer in a team delivering product. And I noted here my frustrations. And one of those, wow, where do I begin? There's the UCD design method, there's design thinking, there's human, where do I begin? Do these things all speak to the same thing? Where do I begin? Which one do I choose, right? And I think that's also encapsulated in the second sticky there, to say there's a design thinking methodology by Stanford, there's UCD, there's double diamond. Which one should I really use to apply in my craft? And then furthermore, what technique should I use, right? So if I'm going through ideation, what is the toolkit or the toolbox that is available to me? And then, at what point of the process do I use a particular technique? Guys, just a bit of a disclaimer, I'm using FigJam. It does not have spell check. I tried to be as thorough as possible, but there might be some live editing as we go along. If I pick up a spelling mistake, I will definitely be live editing. But things like, at what point of the process do I use a particular technique or a particular method? All of those things are the things that kept me up at night and that made me, have a bit of strife in my process. And I was just wondering if anyone on the call would like to share what they are encountering, what current frustrations are in your process. Perhaps it might be with your client right now. It might be around how you execute your work right now, anything really. And I will just add on to our stickies here. Anyone willing to put up their hands? I'm going to go here because I can't see. I know it's not a lot of us. Any volunteers?
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, I guess it's
Go for it.
there's like time pressure to get stuff done, but you want to explore lots of different ideas. So it's like that delivery time pressure, and like I think that's an issue.
Okay. Anyone else?
I see John has his hand up.
So I can't see hands.
Yeah, that's all right.
Go for
John.
it.
All right, cool. Okay, so mine is related to stuff that's been happening recently at work. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we can.
All right, cool. So, okay, so recently we've been doing like something collaborative where we're collaborating with the client. The client is their own designer and we're kind of like doing a back and forth. So one of the issues I've had, or at least what I've noticed, is that there isn't a fully fleshed out user flow and they're kind of like working things on the fly. So especially when you're now collaborating, like, especially when you go through someone else's file, there's no clear user flow, user journey. And they kind of trying to, because like I usually handle interactive prototypes for like development. So like the fact that like the foundation, the thing that will be guiding you, you're now making wireframes and now doing the high fidelity prototype isn't fully fleshed out. And there's a lot of like guesswork and people just figuring like, that can be frustrating because, they'll be like, yeah, let's do this and that, but they don't really have a clear vision of what they really want to do. Whereas if, let's say I was responsible, I'll probably like flesh out the user journey, like first thing before we even do anything else, so that if there are any questions. So that's like one area of frustration for me, like, when collaborating.
100%. And that is such a common problem that I'm sure even, more mature teams are finding, is that unfortunately, the work that we do, we just perceive to just deliver screens, right? Where's the wireframe? Where's the final mock-up? Without consideration of the process. So I think, defining a process for yourself and potentially defining a process that the team needs to follow, really outlining along the path, what are those deliverables and what are those artifacts that are non-negotiable. To me, that sounds like, that can be a potential outlet in or potential solution around how you can go about solving the problem. To say, guys, we're all working together. There is a process. There are certain, non-negotiables, artifacts and deliverables along the way that help with certain efficiencies. Yes, the final output you might see eventually is a screen, is some form of a high fidelity prototype or a final, a visual design. But in order to get there, there's actually a process, and we need to, protect and honor the integrity of that process. So along that process, these are non-negotiables. And for me to do my work properly as a designer, I need a user flow. I need a certain type of user story that is, documented in a particular type of way. So just at the top of my mind, that would be my how I would go about solving the problem, to really just outlining that to the team and perhaps drafting what those non-negotiables are along the way. And things like user flows are very key in helping with the final solution. The final solution is not just a prototype or a screen. I hope that helps. All right, team, anyone else? I know we're running out of time. I think we can perhaps get going. So all of these.
Sorry, Siva, I see Batsy and Irene had their hand raised. I don't know if they could ask quickly.
No problem.
Batsy?
Okay. Oh, okay, Batsy can go first.
It's okay, Irene, you can go first.
Cool, thanks, Batsy. For me, in the user research process, I think one of the biggest challenges is getting buy-in from employees or stakeholders. So the example I can give, I was doing some work for a corporate here, and also part of the process requires us to like interact with, different users or personas, right? Some of the employees end up feeling very suspicious about the process because they thought it was going to put their jobs at risk. Because we were really like drilling down into, what was going on. So yeah, I guess in essence, just kind of employee and stakeholder engagement can vary. And it's really important that your client informs their stakeholders and employees about this process. Otherwise you experience a lot of hurdles.
Absolutely. It's a team sport, right? So everyone needs to understand what we're trying to get out and why is this important. So if all of a sudden there's someone sitting next to me asking me all of these questions around how I do my work without the prior context to say, hold on, there's actually a team that's meant to come here and make the process better or smoother or more efficient for us. And we need to ask certain questions from you. So you're actually playing such an important role in part of, helping us define that. Unless that is, articulated from the very top and everyone buys into that, I can imagine that would be a very big problem. So sorry about that, Irina. I hope you really get some form of a sponsor or some form of an advocate that, perhaps everyone in the organization or everyone in your project team really respects, and they can position the importance of what you do and why you're doing it, what value they would be, deriving. And that everyone who is being questioned or everyone who's being interviewed is actually such an important participant in helping, your client achieve their goals. All right, team. One more.
One more.
We have more hands. Go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly from mine is having to conform to the highest paid person's opinion. So as our design practice is maturing and gaining more respect, I think this might change. But essentially, for example, we ran a whole sprint just to incorporate features in the app that the boss's boss wanted because he wanted them in, you know? So yeah, things like that.
Unfortunately, that I still have that, right? That is something that someone said something, they think it's done in a certain way, but for me, I think that's actually such a great opportunity for you to educate, to say it's not just a matter of you think this might work. I actually want to invite you into my session. Come sit in with me, and come observe what users are actually saying. I obviously don't have full overview of your project, but if those kind of opportunities arise where someone has an opinion and they think something needs to be done in a certain way, but you know that you haven't validated something else, actually open up your door and invite that person into your design process to say, we're having user testing next week. We've incorporated your idea, but then we have other ideas that we've ideated, we've gone through the proper process. Just come in and sit into our validation session and actually hear what people are saying, the people that we're actually designing for, what feedback they're giving us. And I think as soon as you start countering such opinions with actual user data, with things that you can substantiate, not just from your own opinion as a designer, but from people that you're actually designing for. That's where the respect of the craft and the respect for the process starts coming in. And to say it's actually not a matter of what we think as business or someone who is the highest paid stakeholders, what their idea or what their needs are. It's actually according to what our customers or what our users are. And look, this is what they've said. We've validated, we've recorded it. Please find the link here. So I hope that works on your behalf. So team, over here and all of these things that that we have raised, just thinking back to when all of this was also frustrating for me, when I couldn't understand, but why do we have so many pain points along the way? I didn't actually realize that the work that we do just by default, right? The art of creating something, it means that we are opening up ourselves to potential failure, to potentially be scrutinized and be questioned. Usually even the platforms that we deliver in are digital platforms. So everyone feels at some point in time they're also a super digital user because we all interact on digital platforms. That's why it's very simple for someone to put up their hand. So there becomes a time where there are so many frustrations or emotions that come with this role. But what I really started understanding later on in my career is that apart from following a solid process, so all of those things that we're going to talk about, mapping out how we actually going about doing design, documenting our process, making sure that we're evangelizing that process to everyone around us. A lot of those frustrations, how we feel, can usually be alleviated by how we show up. And how we show up is usually captured in particular mindsets. And what do we mean by mindsets? So mindsets are sets of beliefs that shape how we make sense of the world. It influences how we think, how we feel, how we behave in any given situation. So for instance, instead of me, feeling like I'm an imposter, perhaps I am given this very big problem to solve, and I'm not sure that I can solve it. There's a certain mindset that, as a designer, you can actually tune or tap into in order to ease yourself a little bit more in, believing in your ability to perform the role. I like this here that it's a bit of an abstract I got from design. There we go. You see, sorry, there's another editing moment from designkit.org. And it speaks to the fact that human-centered design is as much about our heads as it is about our hands. So the mindsets explore and uncover the philosophy behind our approach to creative problem solving, and just how we think about design directly affects whether you arrive at an innovative or impactful solutions or not. So if you are continuously, you know, in an environment where perhaps it's a difficult stakeholder, stakeholders don't trust what you do. When you go and, you know, want to do something as basic as user research, you are continuously hitting a brick wall. It's only natural and it's only human for us to start feeling like, why am I doing this? You know, for our roles to start feeling very dreary and heavy. But I have found that if we show up in particular mindsets as designers, just in the acknowledgement that our work is not easy, sometimes it might be perceived as a soft craft, but it actually isn't a soft craft. There's actually quite a bit of science behind it. And just sitting and understanding that, you know, there are certain things that I'm not able to, you know, get over because perhaps the environment that I'm in is not as mature, or the people that I'm helping don't understand the process. But what is it that I can do, you know, to show up differently in order to help me alleviate all of these pressures? And I found these mindsets from Design Kit. Again, you can see I copy pasted everything, and I copy pasted the wrong spelling there. But they outline here mindsets of a designer as being these, I think, about 7 things or so. The ability to learn from failure, making what we believe in. So as soon as you're a designer that is put on a particular project and you do not believe in what you're doing, and that's why it's so important, you know, to take our teams or our stakeholders along the journey of the type of feedback that we are getting. Because we need to believe in what we're doing and make sure that it's been impactful and it's meaningful to the lives of people we're designing for. Things like having creative confidence. You know, if someone is perhaps questioning you, or you're looking at this huge, big problem in front of you, there's a certain way around, you know, believing in yourself and having that creative confidence to say, I am actually capable of solving this. Empathizing, of course, that's important. That's what we do, putting ourselves, you know, in users' shoes, understanding, you know, how they would perceive the world, and help us solve, you know, for the world that we've essentially immersed ourselves into. Embracing ambiguity, you know, that's something that's so important because we get thrown in environments that are really not well defined, you know, in environments where there are legacy systems, there are systems that are 15, 20 years old, and you need to figure out, you really need to, you know, take what I call a spaghetti ball and really try to detangle it. But if you're showing up with an attitude or a mindset that's saying, I'm here as a designer and I know ambiguity is part of my role, but I'm going to embrace it, being optimistic and knowing that, you know, the solution that I'm putting out right now might not necessarily be the final thing. There's a certain level of iteration that goes across. I have found that, you know, as soon as you really start channeling yourself in thinking in this way, and I'm applying these mindsets in your day-to-day. So as you show up, knowing that you are creative and you have the ability to solve these things, it already solves about, you know, half of your problems, you know, because there is a certain way in which you have now tuned and showing up for yourselves and your team around you. And then you can start getting to the nitty-gritties around, you know, process, etc. I've just picked a few videos. I won't go through all of them because we're already running out of time. But let me just show you, for instance, maybe let's start with the creative confidence one, because I know that can be quite a big one if you're in an intimidating environment and everyone feels like they have an opinion. And it just really speaks about, you know, us having the ability to solve the problems that we're actually thrown in. I'm going to play it quickly and then we can get in quickly into the process stuff.
I'm David Kelly. I'm the founder and chairman of IDEO, and I'm the founder of the D School at Stanford. Creative confidence is the notion that you have big ideas and that you have the ability to act on them. Yeah, lots of people say I'm not creative, and we prove them wrong. I mean, it's amazing how many people will flip. If you're not confident, you have some fear that's blocking you from being confident. So we have to remove that fear. If you take somebody in a kind of an easy, simple problem and you give them some success, that builds a little confidence. And it's kind of baby steps. You have to go through lots of iterations, and each time they find themselves successful. And by the end, they say, oh my God, I'm a creative person. I mean, you can have a mindset that you do your job in a creative way. You know, pick all the little pieces of what you have to do you know, in your normal day and just say, I'm going to do each one of those little things in an extraordinary way. And that adds up to being wildly creative. So many of us try to kind of stay in the middle. We try to encourage people to kind of try to get away with something. You know, if you kind of stay down the middle, it's safe, but you're not doing anything that might be new to the world. So, you know, within the bounds of what you're allowed to do, you know, try to get away with something. If you have creative confidence, then you have more stick-to-itiveness. You try more things. You go down different paths, and you're kind of fearless in the face of failure. And this kind of leads to routine innovation.
100%. I'm sure we can all relate. Let me maybe play just one more. I think this was the empathy one. The embracing ambiguity, I think, is very relevant to the kind of work that we do. So let's just go through that quickly.
I'm Patrice Martin. I'm the co-lead and creative director of IDEO.org. A critical piece of embracing ambiguity is letting multiple ideas coexist simultaneously. That means we're just exploring lots of possible solutions, lots of possible answers, and we don't know what's going to work out. You walk by a room of designers who are in the thick of the analysis process. There, you'll hear things like, not quite sure how this is relevant, but it might fit. Or, I don't know about this idea, but I want to hold on to it. That's embracing ambiguity, because we're letting a lot of ideas kind of percolate around. We don't know what that answer is, but we know that we need to give ourselves the permission to explore. Design thinking is a process of creating new ideas. We're going through it so we can get to innovative solutions that really work for people. And that means we don't know what the answer is when we start. And that not knowing can be pretty uncomfortable. We're not used to that, but that's actually the point. We want to embrace ambiguity. We want to give ourselves the permission to explore lots of different possibilities so that the right answer can reveal itself.
100%. I'm going to share the FigJam board, and you can have access to all of these. And I mean, about 4 or 5 more that I feel, you know, all of us can relate to. And I found that as soon as you have fine-tuned your mindset to really align with these, and I'm sure that there are many others out there on you know, principles, attitude, mindsets, how we show up. I know, for instance, my colleague at the bank has recently presented a very unique set of mindsets for our environment at the bank. But I have found that, you know, as soon as you start tapping into this, you know, embracing that ambiguity is part of the process, that you will not have all of the answers. Acknowledging that sometimes it will be difficult for you to solve a problem, but you know you have it in you, you know, to cultivate a sense of creative confidence. I think it would really be great to go through all of these and just try to remind yourself of them every day when you're facing those challenges where, you know, you're in a world where you feel no one gets this, no one understands me. I found these are really great anchor points to get you through. And then now we can get into, you know, part of the process, but I really just wanted to start the session with those kind of foundational skills, or the foundational base that help us cope, because I think everyone here is immersed in the process. I don't think anything that I'll be saying here is new, but I'm hoping it at least, you know, it gives us a bit of a cheat sheet, demystifies and makes things a little bit easier, because this world does get a little bit, you know, complex. So how does one go about applying, you know, a design approach to solve problems? And there are a couple and a number of them out there. You know, we have the double diamond. This is from the Design Council. I'm sure at some point in time we've all come across the double diamond. You know, the discover, define way of solving problems, and you know, I'm sure you've seen the detailed methodology and how this pans out. And then IDEO also has what they call the HCD, the human-centered design process. You know, the diverge and converge. They have it in 3 groupings: inspiration, ideation, and implementation. And there's certain things that you do in each. There's also Stanford Design School that came up with, you know, the very famous 5 design thinking steps of empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, testing. Then we have our traditional, UCD, user-centered design process, or you start here, you do research, there's some form of concept, you test, you detail your design, you implement, you develop and measure. Is that sometimes it does get a little bit overwhelming. So which one do you use? Do I use the double diamond? Do I use the HCD process from IDEO? Do I use the design thinking, which has now become an overarching umbrella term? Or do I use the traditional UCD process? And really, when I was going through all of them, and having been someone that has been exposed to all of them at some point in my career, I actually realized that all of them have something in common, right? They start with a good understanding of people and the needs that the design is intended to meet. So whether you use design thinking or the UCD methods, all of them have this one thing at the core. All of them start with a good understanding of people and what their needs are. All of them also have this in common, right? It's about how do you get from point A of not knowing or having an idea, so it could be type of scenario, to point B where you do know, or it should be that is a little bit more informed because you would have done, and gone through the entire process. So when I look at all of them, so the design thinking, the double diamond, the IDEO, the UCD process, they could all really be summarized into these 4 key groups. And I've used these 4 key groups as, some form of reference point for myself over the years. And I have found that I'm able to easily relate to these 4 key groups to whatever methodology, whether design thinking, whether double diamond, whether, your more traditional UCD process. All of them really encapsulate in one form or the other these 4 key groups. Some form of discovery or research, some form of definition or synthesis of that research, some form of ideation or development of process, some form of delivery and implementation. All of that encompasses the testing, etc. So I'm hoping that these 4, it's not necessarily to replace whatever methodology that you are using right now, because I'm sure you're fully immersed in that. But it's really to come in and try simplify this world of so many options, to say all of it is actually encompassed or summarized into these four key things. And we'll just go into them quickly. I'll share this link. I've included some of the resources that I feel might be quite helpful in helping you, select the actual tools or techniques that you would need, to derive from each and every one of these steps. So the first one around discover research, this is really around getting insight into the problem. And someone mentioned earlier on that, but they're not giving me user flows. And I think this process, or however it is that you wish to go back to the office and perhaps the techniques, some of the deliverables that are outputs of each and every one of these phases, and see how you can maybe potentially document a formalized design process in your space that you can officially communicate with various touch points and various deliverables along the way. So the first one is around, you now have a problem, you have a brief, you have the ask. So the client has brought you in to come do something. So firstly, you need to get insight into the problem, right? So I found, I know I also have done this several times, that I get a brief from client and I want to fulfill it right away, but that's actually not the value that we're bringing to the table as designers. Otherwise, why not take the brief and take it straight to, for instance, the engineering team and have them implement it right away? So in order for us to demonstrate our value, it's really important to question the ask or to question the brief that has been given to us by really scrutinizing it and challenging every part of it and evaluating the various fields of interest that are part of that ask, right? So yes, you've asked me something, Mr. Client or Ms. Client, but please give me time to take a step back. I want to really scrutinize this a little bit more. In order for me to add value into this project, or in order for me to really give you the best of an experienced design profession, I need to make sure that we're asking the right questions. I need to validate for myself that what we are solving for is the right thing. And it actually ties back to that mindset of believe in what you're making. And really for me, this is where we start defining that believing what I'm making. Yes, you've given me a brief, you've given me an ask, perhaps that ask is very business centric, but I'm going to probe deeper, for the user, and making sure that the problem that we're trying to solve firstly is actually a problem, and we've phrased it in the listing as many elements as you can, finding characteristics, defining areas of interest and extremes, listing the type of people or personas that would be interacting with whatever it is that you're trying to solve for. Other experiences that can be related, industries that are doing the same thing. Are you looking at that ask, really tearing it apart, making sure that you actually solve for the right problem? So here, there isn't any pressure to have come up with a thing yet. Quite often this phase is that you still have a pile of unstructured research findings. You've literally taken that ask and broken it down a little bit further. And what are the techniques that we can start using in this phase? I've listed a few there, a lot more. I've listed the resource there where you can find more. But things like discovery workshops, right? Sometimes a brief is just the top of the iceberg. You actually want to delve deeper. You want to put in more people to ask more questions. So hold a discovery workshop. Sometimes you want to, I think as someone was mentioning earlier on, sometimes you want to interview people and get a lot more insight around that. This is the phase in which you do that. After we have gotten insight into the problem, we then move into what we've called the defining or the synthesizing phase. This is now where we start crystallizing our areas of focus. So remember, the last phase is that we came up with this list of really unstructured findings. Now this is the phase where we're trying to make sense of our findings, where we're synthesizing the research, where we are, summarizing the raw findings. You are trying to figure out whether are there certain themes or certain categories that are coming up. You're trying to find insights or golden threads that are really undeniable. So if something in your research really kept on coming over, coming up over and over again, this is what we call the dominant or the undeniable customer truth. And those are the kind of things that you can now start, honing in on to say, yes, I started my research as a pool of a lot of unstructured things. I have now tried to make sense of those unstructured things by coming up with themes and seeing if there's a golden thread. And these are the certain things that I believe I have discovered from my research or my discovery phase. And these are the things that are absolute undeniable truth. What the outcome of this phase usually is an updated brief or the updated ask or scope of work or whatever it is that you call it in your particular area of work. And usually what will happen after the research is that you will either clarify the details of that initial brief, you might even challenge it, or you might even you said this is a problem. I've done some preliminary research. This is actually not the problem, right? Rather, the problem is 1, 2, 3. And this is so important because this is what actually defines what solution is being developed, in the end. And this is where it starts getting important to also start, showing our work, taking our stakeholders along the path. It's so dangerous when you're given a brief, you go sit in a corner and someone comes see you right at the very end. So as we are, trying to detangle the spaghetti ball, as I call it, it's so important that those findings, those touch points, those milestones along the way are also communicated back to our stakeholders, to our broader cross-functional teams. Even if you are, not perhaps positioned at the client all the time, but maybe the delivery team, believe me, it makes a lot of much more impact for even engineers to understand how we came up with the solution. So this is by no means a solo spot. As far as possible, we need to cast our net wide to say, yes, this was the ask was given. I have done research. This is the research that I have done. Perhaps where possible, invite people into your research so that they can start appreciating your process as well, and say, based on my research, this is what I feel we should be solving for. So some of the techniques here, problem statement definition, North Star definition, how might we definition. So as you're synthesizing and you're coming up with your the relevant themes and your undeniable customer truths, you can then start defining what the actual problem statement is and what the potential direction of where we headed starts looking like. After you've done that, and now we're confident in what we're solving for, we have framed the question, we've done our preliminary research, we can now start developing or ideating our ideas. So we formulate ideas based on the findings. This is usually labeled as the fun phase, because this is now where we get to brainstorm and come up with all the cool possible ideas in solving up the problem that we've just defined. What is important here is to really make sure that there is a wide range of people that are able to contribute towards this process. And I always say that design is not a solo sport, that's so important. This is a sport where we need to bring minds together. It cannot be left to just, being the responsibility of experienced designers. So if, for instance, there's a particular stakeholder that has commissioned you on a project and you're solving something for them, bring them in, ask them to pull in their team and have your brainstorming or your ideating sessions together. So what are the core principles around, coming up with ideas is that we a mentality. So in other words, there are no suggestions or there are no ideas that can be turned down here. I did say where possible, get others involved as part of a team sport. It will be, however, very important to make sure everyone has context. So you don't necessarily just pull in someone into a brainstorming session who hasn't already walked the journey with you in the last 2 phases. So if there are certain people invited here that don't have the context, or maybe that didn't start out with you when you were doing your research, that didn't have context or a view of what you've defined or synthesized, it's very important that that form of an overview is given here so that everyone has context of the findings that led to this point, and therefore be able to really brainstorm around a path that you've already set. You would then need to evaluate ideas and select the most impactful, doable, and tangible ones. Unfortunately, in our world, we still have things like technology constraints, etc., that we would need to take into consideration. But having all of those ideas presented and then mapping them to what is actually doable or impactful, and also articulating what would make that solution a success. Those are all very important part of the developing and the ideating phase. So what is the outcome here? It's a few ideas to later prototype and test in order to find the best answer to the problem. So here, we're not necessarily coming up with a final solution. You have brainstormed and maybe you have narrowed it down to about 1, 2, perhaps even 3 very key ideas that you believe could work within your constraints, that can be supported by technology, etc. And now those are the ideas that you are taking forward to go validate. The techniques here, my goodness, they're endless. I just listed a few here. Some of them I haven't even utilized myself, but there's what they call brain writing, start bursting, role storming, gap filling, and then things like dot voting when it comes to a team actually narrowing down their options. You can do dot voting where everyone voices their opinion to say, I think we should go for this, and there's some form of voting that takes place. But also starting to define the feasibility and the success indicators. So it doesn't matter what solution our customers end up choosing. What would make the success, this project a success is 1, 2, 3. Really articulating that upfront when we're ideating and we're coming up with the solution. Even upfront, even before then, even when we are getting insight and synthesizing the problem and defining our how might we and the North Star. This is where you start getting a view of, what would make this project a success. And it's so important that we articulate that, because that is the stuff that is going to be measured when this product has now gone live. And that's how we also start communicating the value of what we bring to the table. So often I found that, as design professionals, we we design, we make things beautiful, but when we start talking about business metrics, so what value has this project brought to the table? So, you know, how has it shifted the dial? We're not very in tune of those things, but we really need to start getting into a habit to say, when we are, you know, formulating our North Star, when we're coming up with potential solutions that solve the problem, we are very clear about what is it that we're trying to achieve, what are those success metrics, right? And then lastly, after you've narrowed things down to say, these are the two things that I'm going to go ahead with, we would then need to validate our ideas and outline how the final one needs to be implemented. So we need to start bringing our ideas to life through tangible output that can be validated by customers. There's another typo. Apologies for that, team. So what does that look like? We start prototyping our ideas and getting it in front of actual customers as much as possible, right? Taking note of what the pain points are and defining a plan on how to tackle them. Sometimes a customer, you know, you'll be validating something, really picks up a plan of quite a number of things that we know perhaps right now we're not able to achieve those. Are we able to maybe start, you know, maybe putting that into some form of a backlog and start thinking about, you know, how does iteration 2 or iteration 3 of this platform looks like? And this is where we start getting, you know, that whole iterative mindset to say, yes, I'm delivering something now, but ideally it doesn't just stop here. There's continuous learning that needs to take place. And when we've also defined our success metrics, it's always very easy to then map back the performance of whatever platform, when it is finally live, to what we had intended it to do and iterate from that point onwards, right? I've mentioned the importance of the success metrics, the importance of gathering as much customer feedback as possible through prototypes, whether, you know, low fidelity prototypes, high fidelity prototypes, etc. Coming out of this phase, we really need to have a final product that's answering the initial problem. And by initial problem, I don't necessarily mean the problem in the purple box. I mean the problem that you have synthesized and defined and, you know, done all the groundwork in making sure that we get the right solution out. So here, what are the techniques that we can use? These are low fidelity prototypes, storyboards, wireframing, mockups, user testing. There are multiple platforms of user testing. I know at the bank we use Usability Hub. There's also Maze, you know, sometimes actually getting people in the office. I know with COVID, sometimes it's a little bit difficult, but perhaps getting people to do some, you know, task-based user testing via Zoom or via Teams. This is really the point or the phase where we start defining all of that, incorporating all of that feedback that we're getting from our customers, and really going back to your team with a final product that is fully validated, that's answering the question that you would have crystallized or defined or synthesized in step 2 of your process. So having a look at this, I just felt, and this is my last slide, and maybe we can have a chance to talk about things a little bit more. I know it's already 9:06. This is such an important thing. So, you know, as much as at the beginning we outlined what are the things that, you know, all of these processes have in common, and we said all of them start with the user in mind. All of them start with, yes, we have a problem, but I'm going to go validate that problem to make sure that it is, you know, solving problems for the people that we're actually designing for. In the same breath, it's also very important to note this particular point as a non-negotiable. Quite often we are, you know, pulled into work, or we are perhaps brought onto the team because there's a perception that you're an experienced designer, therefore you're an expert. Therefore, we do not need to validate with users. And that is such a false consensus. And I see here Nielsen and Norman Group actually termed it nicely. They call it the false consensus effect. And it is particularly always, you know, connected to people that are working in the technology space. So designers, developers, researchers, we all fall prey to this false consensus effect where we're projecting our own behaviors and our own reactions onto users. So as much as I had said, you know, all of those four, or rather all of those methodologies have one thing in common, and all of them are putting our users first. there's also a non-negotiable on all of them, is that we need to validate with our customers. Otherwise, the value of what we do cannot be realized. And I think that is, often the trap that as experienced designers, we fall into, that it's very easy for people around us to think, I've brought you in, but you're the expert. Why is it that you now need me to go validate with customers? I think we really need to be ready with answers that are, helping us substantiate that point. And that's it, team. I do not have any more slides. I hope this was valuable.
That's amazing.
It was. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Has anyone got any questions?
I'm just also trying to look at the comments. I see there's a hand up. Irene, is it from last time or is it from now?
No, it's from now. So I'm curious to know, you're speaking about like Standard Bank, like regionally, and how South Africa is the one that's kind of leading in kind of this user-centered design approach. How did you manage to like operationalize it or like integrate it into the bank, and like what suggestions do you have to try and onboard the other branches? Like how do you get them to also embrace this approach?
100%. And Irene, can I just say, that's not a problem we've solved. It's a problem we are actively solving. And it goes back to the value, right? And that's why it's so important for us in each and every initiative that we put together. There's something, and I think I saw it somewhere called, it was called something like creative accountability, that the work that we do is not just pretty pictures. So we really need to now start thinking about the business layer and defining design in context of solving business problems in terms of really tangible rents. Well, listen to me talking about rents, I'm in South Africa, but actual monetary values or actual tangible things that the bank sees. Oh, this is actually adding to our bottom line. This is saving us money, or this is, adding to a certain level of efficiency. So it's only when you start, showcasing those case studies, showcasing those wins. I'll give you an example. There's a team here in the bank that works in our corporate and investment banking space, right? They have obviously a corporate platform that helps really large corporates with credit notes, etc. And they were working on a platform in Uganda that was very heavily hard copy, paper-based. It was essentially a process that used to take up to a week for a customer to submit something, and they would need to sign it, would need to pass about 4 or 5 people before it could actually get approved and the bank gain money from that. And they solved that problem to, processing that takes just under 30 minutes. So you can imagine taking a process from a week to about 30 minutes, what that actually does for the value in the bank. So it was really a matter of, let's showcase those case studies that we have. We have now moved past the point where design is just about pretty pictures. And wherever there are those perceptions, we really need to crush those perceptions and show our value in terms of products that are doing well, what they're bringing in for the organization, where the value is at. And it's only when you start outlining and highlighting those case studies that people are a little bit more, open in investing. So that's the work that my team actually does in evangelizing, in highlighting those case studies, in showing why you need this, right? But also in part of the conversation of how do you build conducive teams, that it's not just design's responsibility. As much as important for us to have a design capability, we need to make sure that our development capability is just as strong, and the cross-functional team that supports us also is able to show up and enable us to design good solutions. But to answer your question, in short, you need to show the value. And showing the value, it's not just a pretty screen. Showing the value is, how has a project I've delivered contributed to the bottom line of the business? It's only when you start showing that value, those wins, those case studies, that additional investment can come in.
Oh,
Does
that's
that
great.
answer
Thank
you?
you. It does. It does. Thanks.
100%. Thank you.
Who else has got a question?
Go for it, Kim.
Yeah, so one of my questions was how, like, some of these, I like how you start off with just having the right mindset, how important that is. But a lot of those mindset things, I feel like my education in school, like, maybe set me up for not being good at those. Like, for example, like accepting failure, right? At school, it was all about getting the grades and not failing. How do you think, like, what's your thoughts on that? What can schools be doing better? Do schools need to be doing things better? And maybe as our community, we could like help sort of, I don't know, implement some of those things. I'm not sure.
100%. Kim, I'm not sure if I mentioned to you guys right at the beginning that we homeschool. So with the entire COVID thing, our little one was started school and we were not comfortable letting her go. So we've had to, like, I guess, you know, do this whole schooling thing at home, get on a particular program. But what I started finding out in that particular process is that there are so many things that we only learn later on in life that can actually start being integrated at a very early age. So even design thinking, there are schools in the US, I don't know if you guys have colleagues there, but I found that when I was searching on Google, for instance, there's design thinking for elementary school. So just imagine a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, obviously in an age-appropriate manner, starting to have those principles and, you know, those foundational skills in solving problems from 7 years old. I mean, some of us only came across this when we started working. It wasn't even at varsity, it was much later on in our career. So I absolutely think that, you know, firstly, the world of work is structured differently. How, you know, people make a living is structured differently. Not everyone is now required to even have a degree. Not everyone is required to have a corporate job. Entrepreneurship is, you know, on the rise, and it's actually, you know, perceived as the thing that will, you know, have most people employed as compared to corporate and government jobs. So absolutely, we need to look at, you know, fresh ways and in which we can equip schools, in which we can equip maybe even universities around what are the most efficient ways of gearing us up for success. Have we moved on with, you know, the world of technology around us, and the, you know, the future, and how it is structured? Do we feel we are equipped enough? And, you know, our kids that are at schools, do they get enough foundation in order to learn those kind of things? And I don't think that is the case. So a lot of this kind of thing needs to be really intentional type of teaching and intentional type of problems. Like, why is it important for you to be able to, you know, experiment? And do we maybe have a, you know, a different view of failure? That failure is actually not you not doing well. It shows that you've actually tried. But unless those things are taught at a very early age, and I mean, there are a host of other things like financial management. You can start teaching that to a 6-year-old, you know, and you're giving and you equipping them with all of those things upfront from a very early age. But you're right, you know, even people showing vulnerability, right? Being able to put up your hand and saying, I actually don't get it. I'm sorry, I actually need to take a step back. I need a little bit more time. We're not taught to think that way. And I do think there definitely needs to be, you know, very intentional efforts that help us show up in a certain way. But I also think perhaps, yes, you were not brought up like that. Perhaps, you know, your schooling doesn't allow you to show up in that way. It's now up to the culture in your organization to give you that permission, right? And that's why we start delving into topics like psychological safety, to put together social contracts and rules of engagement in teams, to say, yes, perhaps how we operate in this team is not how one would operate in their normal societal context. I mean, there are many things that come into play, traditions, cultural stuff. Other people are not able to, look at people in senior positions in the eye, because in certain cultures that is considered disrespectful. But if there is a certain, rules of engagement and social contract to say, in this team, there are certain rules in which we abide by. You must always feel free to raise your hand. You must never feel worried that you're going to be asking a stupid question. No question is stupid. Those social contracts really start giving permission for people to show up in a certain way that perhaps challenges how they were brought up. But it's a safe space. You've been given permission to perhaps exercise that muscle a little bit more as compared to, how you would show up in your everyday lives. But I absolutely do believe, especially after being exposed to the homeschooling stuff, that there are a lot of things that we could start doing at a much earlier age. Till today in South Africa, I'm still struggling to find design thinking for my little one.
Yeah.
I would need to subscribe to some course. And I think for me, those are skills that can really be imparted at a much earlier age.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Tafara, I see Tafara has his hand up. Have you got a question, Tafara?
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, my network had just tripped.
No worries.
So what I understand from design thinking, it seems to rely quite a great deal on experimentation and understanding the user rather directly. So what this means is, because I'm not trying to enforce my own views onto the user, there's experimentation. How can we ensure that our experiments have the integrity that they require? Because I'm sure if you run a wrong experiment, you would definitely get the wrong results. So how can you ensure that you're running the right experiment and probably sufficiently enough before you either choose to persevere with your idea or pivot to another one?
Right. I think that's why it's so important to go through that purple and yellow phase. So that discover, research / define and synthesize. That's where you really start honing in and defining what your experiment would look like. So selecting the right experiment means that you would have really scrutinized and understood what your problem statement is. And often that means not taking what you've been told is a problem at face value. You almost need to prove it for yourself that, is this really a problem? Yes, you've given me this, Mr. Stakeholder or Mr. Client or whoever has brought me onto this project, but please give me time. I just want to prove this for myself, that this is actually a problem that we're solving for. And you found that as soon as you have done that, preliminary validation for yourself, and those undeniable truths, that at any point in time, I can go speak to this particular group of clients, group of customers, and I would come back with this undeniable truth. It's only when you're at that level of confidence that you can start honing in. And that's why we always say, 1, 2, or 3 solutions can come out of your ideation phase. That's why we need to validate, right? We might find that there are certain nuances that we as designers or people that are in charge of defining that particular product, we're not able to see that until we put it in front of our customers. So firstly, defining that problem, validating that the problem that is on paper in front of you in that brief, in that scope of work, is the actual problem, because you would have gone away and done your discovery and your research phase, and in speaking to people and defining what your personas are, really coming in to hone into your undeniable truths. And from those undeniable truths, that's where you can now start deriving the things to experiment on, because you are certain, you're sure that your base of research, your base of reference is solid, because you've done that groundwork. Where experimentation starts getting a little bit dangerous is when you haven't done that. So you've taken that brief at face value, you believe that the problem that you've been told is the problem, but you haven't really gone in and identified those undeniable truths, and you start ideating from that point. You have potentially created a point where you can go down a rabbit hole, whereas customers might not even find this valuable to begin with. So the earlier you start with those preliminary validation, it actually saves you time further down the process. And what is the whole point of design, right? I don't like failing fast, because that sounds like, you know, the work that we do encourages failure. That's not the case, but perhaps we can rephrase that, and it says it encourages learning fast. So as soon as you start, or rather the sooner you start with, you know, those foundational base research to really get you to a point where you've crystallized and you've focused on your area of research, the likelihood of that experimentation being completely you know, left wing or completely misaligned to what problem you're trying to solve for the user, that minimizes quite considerably. So those very upfront phases of research and crystallization of the problem that you're trying to solve, those are very important in giving you a solid standpoint that you can, you know, cross-reference with confidence. I hope that helps.
That helps very much. I think it brings a lot of clarity and confidence to the whole approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Tafara.
Awesome. Has anyone else got a question? I think something that jumped out for me was just how much in that initial discovery step you can be given, the client can give you sort of the brief, and by the end of the define step, you could be completely rejecting that brief, or saying, here's like what's actually the situation on the ground. And unless the organization you're in has that kind of design maturity, like you were saying, you actually have to be quite a diplomat almost to do that kind of tactfully, to get your, and like you were saying, showing the work that you've done is so important, and involving them in the process.
100%. Particularly where you don't have buy-in yet, where you almost kind of have to like substantiate your worth, and not everyone believes in that process. Absolutely, take from day one, show your work. Don't take the brief and sit in a corner. We call it the ta-da moment. That should never happen. So when you get to a final solution, you know, all your stakeholders, everyone that needs to have seen that, needs to have known what you've gone through along the way. Otherwise, it becomes very, very difficult.
Yeah, for sure.
To tear that brief apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I'm aware that there are some little ones who are missing you, so we're not going to keep you any longer.
No worries.
I think that, yeah, unless there's any last minute questions, we can wrap up. And thank you so much for your time. Is there a way that that you prefer, or you're open to being in contact with people, that people can reach out to you?
I already saw, as we were talking, I was getting some LinkedIn
Oh, perfect.
requests. I think that's great.
Cool.
But yeah, absolutely. Kim has my details. Please feel free to share that with everybody. When I was, well, someone at the bank saw that I'll be doing this. They saw it from LinkedIn and they posted in our bank group. And we had so many other people put up their hands that want to contribute, that want to come up and speak. So I'll also connect you with all of those. I think, yeah, absolutely. Really great.
That'd be really great.
Very, very amazing. Thank you, team.
Cool. Yeah, and we'll share the recording also, so people who weren't here can see it, and also you'll obviously be able to share it with your team and others. So great. Well, thank you so much, Seba, and thank you everyone for joining today. We'll see you again next month.
Thank you, team. I hope this was valuable.
Definitely, it was amazing, and I'm sure there'll be more follow-up questions to come. So yeah, that was great.
Feel free to reach out. So much.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks.